Hey guys, welcome back to War Thunder, welcome to some F-34G in the Italian tech tree. This thing is at 7.3, and it's an amazing plane. Hands down, I think what this might be is the best jet at its battle rating, period. This might even be the best jet at a battle rating. But to put the actual aircraft's balancing aside, because I don't like talking about jet balancing, I've recently been working on some kind of battle rating schemes and, kind of a 10-tier system. Basically, I don't want to go into too many details, but those of you who follow my live streams have probably heard about some of these ideas. The reason I don't like talking about balance is because in the current meta of the game, or the current redistribution of tiers at top tier, so the starting jets at, 6.7, 7.0, moving on to the later ones at 9.0, it's pretty impossible to balance things out. And if any of you have watched McChickenbite's video on 8.0, you'll likely understand what this is about. It's very hard to say the F-34 can be upped to 7.7 or stay at 7.3. I think the plane has performance of 8.0, but at the same time it shouldn't be fighting top tiers. So at the moment, the way the current redistribution of top tiers is, I just don't want to comment on it, because if I was to adjust the battle rating of the F-34, I would also go and adjust the battle rating of every other jet in the game. But I did want to talk about one thing, that is boom and zooming. Such a great expression, really. When I first came into the game, and I heard people talking about turn fighting, it's like, yeah, turn fighting is easy, man. Energy fighting. Okay, energy fighting is a bit more advanced, BF-109s and stuff. Boom and zooming. Oh, what's that? And then you get to the American planes and suddenly you realize that, hey, this is the only way I can fly them. They've got slow climb rate, it takes forever to get to altitude, and I have to get to altitude. And I think this is why American players suffer so much, is because it's boring, really. You got a sight climb for 6 minutes, you get to about 5-6K, you start zooming down on a BF-9 or a Spitfire, and they reverse you, and boom, you're shot down. A little hit to the wing, and it just blows up. Boom and zooming is boring because it's routine, because it's the same maneuver performed over and over again, because it's too predictable. Because somebody who has flown boom and zoomers, somebody who has couple of thousand matches in the game and is fighting against a boom and zoomer will likely know everything about boom and zooming inside and out. And so when you go down to boom and zoom them, they already expect it, and it's very, very simple to defend against. But I think it was a couple of months ago when I made a video on the P-47M, the American Premium at 5.3, and it hit me that there is something that I can do to make this really annoying playstyle a little bit less annoying, faster, more efficient, and also trick the enemy. Reversing the word order. Instead of boom and zooming, why not zoom and boom? Because boom and zooming, for me, is like looking at a dolphin, going in and out of the water. And the thing is that it doesn't matter at which point you fire, because boom and zooming, for me, stands for movement. It's continuously transferring energy from potential to kinetical. If we're talking about basic physics here, and I'm bad at physics, but kinetic, potential energy, that's what basically you're excluding. You're converting altitude into speed, and then speed to altitude, and altitude into speed, and you're doing this over and over again. It never is really perfectly stated at which point you should be firing your guns. And I think one of the main problems is that American fighters, being the prominent ones for this, example a P-51, they have 50 cals. Now, even with the current buff, it takes a little bit of time for the guns to be on target to be able to destroy the enemy player. In the classic way of boom and zooming, as we've had it for years now, the primary issue would be that players need time on target. And yet, when you're diving, you're going very, very fast. The faster you're going, the harder it is to, get guns on target for longer than maybe just a split second. In the reverse of the boom and zoom, what actually happens, and this is very interesting, when you're zooming up into an enemy, the enemy usually doesn't have high speed, and you're slowing your plane down, meaning you're making it a lot easier, both on your own end and on the enemy's end, to pretty much do a lot of damage with very low effort in mind. But I have to disappoint you, because if you were expecting now to take a P-51 and go for a spin flying at ground level then zooming up, it likely isn't going to work. This is a tactic, I think, mainly simply applicable to aircraft in which they're the fastest at its bat rating. So you could do this in a F-84, because the F-84 is so under-tiered that everything it fights can't simply catch it. And so instead of, just running around, you can use this reverse boom and zooming technique to kind of get the advantage, the upper hand, and not be too annoying for the enemy players. As for flying something like a P-51 or a P-47, the only time I would personally rely on reverse boom and zooming would be in the case of late match, I'm on low altitude, there's nothing else I really have to do. You know, when you're forced into it, I wouldn't manually go and engage such a mode because it isn't going to end in your advantage. It's simply because if the enemy has the performance at the altitude you're at, or if the enemy has the performance in the speed you're going at, you're going to have problems. So reverse boom and zooming, whilst a great idea theoretically, can only be applicable to a handful of vehicles. But if you are extremely keen at testing this out, I would give you a personal advice: do it in ground battles. In ground battles, flying aircraft often relies on flying low to alleviate the issue of getting spotted. In air battles, as it is though, with the site climbing process and whatnot, it might not be the greatest idea. So whenever you're testing planes, I think this is maybe a personal tip for a lot of you. If you're flying an aircraft that is stock, or you're flying an aircraft and you're struggling with, or you're trying to test out a couple of alternate techniques, maybe the best way to do it would be to fly it in ground battles where you get an air spawn, there's no spawning mechanic, so you can have a little bit more of a breathing space, for say. And with that topic covered, I want to spend just maybe a couple of minutes talking about the F-34G to give you an understanding of how I used it. Now, first of all, I use the talisman on mine, meaning that the grind process, the spading process, the amount of time that I spent flying this thing stock, significantly lower than an average player would. So if you're playing without premium, or if you're playing without the talisman, I mean, I think most of you are playing without a talisman, but as it is, I don't regret a thing putting a talisman on this plane. And as a matter of fact, if the Italian tech tree had more than the 35 vehicles currently available, I would definitely put a talisman on this thing, and it would be one of the best planes to grind with. At the moment, with its current performance, at its current battle rating, the F-34G is, in my opinion, hands down the easiest plane in the game. It just doesn't take much skill, it's very straightforward. And what you can also do is you can take the 24 rockets, the HFAR rockets, not even the 32, the 24 will do the job, fly in a straight line because you get an air spawn, kill one of the bases, and what you've basically done is you've given yourself effectively free research points, free silver lines, did a little bit of ticket bleed for the enemy team, and then you can just zoom away. And so if you're able to predict which matches you're getting down to a battle rating of 6.3 or 6.7, you can reliably do that and get a couple of really easy points. So from a grinding perspective, the F-34E is hands down probably one of the best planes of the game right now. But again, because the only aircraft you can really research with it would be, and this is not theoretical, this is actually factual, the G56. The G56 would be the only prop you could actually research, considering that you're going through the normal tech tree, because you're required to unlock 6 vehicles in the previous tier, which means that if you rush the F-34G, you will still have to go through the bombers. Those are the cheapest ones to research. Yeah, the G56 would be remaining, and then the G91. So effectively, to unlock a jet, put a talisman on it, and then grind 3 other vehicles with it, it seems a little bit far-fetched, and it's not really necessary, especially if you already have the G55S. But in the future, obviously, the F-34 is going to have a bit of a different role. Presuming that we're going to eventually get Italian tanks, and presuming that we're going to see the addition of more vehicles to the tech tree in the future patches, I think it's going to be an extremely nice thing to see these F-34's rockets being put into actual use. But I think one of the questions that's been popping up the most is, has this update ran the F-84B obsolete? And the answer is no. I think the F-84B, whilst in a 1v1 against the G, is definitely, pretty bad. The F-84B still has usability in ground battles, which is something that the G series doesn't have at the moment. The B series still gets a fantastic matchmaker at 7.0. The potential down to 6.0 is pretty brutal. Yeah, I think that the battle rating currently applicable, so the 7.3 for the G series should be upped to 7.7. But again, with no 8.3s and no 8.7s in the game, the entire jet battle rating bracket might as well get completely reworked. If you're flying the G series at the moment, obviously you're limited to flying it in air battles. If you're flying the B series, which I'm expecting more players to do, there's a couple of really great things you can do with it. And the B series of F-84, I think, is fantastic at its natural BR of 7.0, but if you really want full effectiveness, I would use it as a spawn point maker in top tier. So take a 9.0 lineup with the F2 Sabre in mind, and before you spawn the F2 Sabre, spawn the F-34. You got 2 tiny tims, additional 8 HFAR rockets. And I think even recently I uploaded a little clip of getting a 5-kill streak pretty much with the F-84 in a top tier matchmaker. It's a fantastic plane, not the most maneuverable one, so doesn't really maintain energy well, but for the really fast manufacturement of points, if your rocket aim is good, it's definitely a fantastic plane to fly out with. So, F-34G, is it worth getting? Yes, if you already have all the aircraft in the game. Purely is because of that. I'm looking at time spent getting the tech tree and what you really get out of it. You know, if your mind is set to, hey, I want to get a jet and I want to fly it out consecutively for a couple of weeks, then yeah, the F-34 is great. I mean, you can unlock it, you can practice with it. You know, it's fast to achieve and it's very easy to learn with. But if you're looking for a kind of a bang to buck ratio, I would still probably put my bets on the F-34B. And again, it's because you can use it in ground battles at the moment, whereas the F-34G is just a bit of a blind sore spot. And not to mention that when you're using the F-34B, what you're making up is you're making up experience to unlock the A5 Sabre, to unlock the F-25, to unlock the F2 Sabre. When you're flying out the F-34G, what you're trying to unlock is probably the G91s. And don't get me wrong, G91s at 8.0 are fantastic planes, but from the couple of days of playing them, and I will make an individual video on that, but as a quick prefix, the 91s get up-tiered a lot, and whilst being good planes, they're not the optimum seal clubbers. They're not planes that I would go out and fly leisurely. They're aircraft that require a lot of focus, they rip their wings off quite easily, they have to be very cautious when up-tiered, and stuff like the top-tier performing jets like Hunter, CL-13 or the F2 Sabre absolutely ruffle-stomp them. And it's that comparison between the F2 Sabre and the G91, which is the top unlockable aircraft, that makes me want to go for the F-34B before I go for the F-34G. But definitely regardless, if you're trying to find a very good jet to start off with, the Italian tech tree, probably right now, the best bet out there.